now rocking with TDF everything. Spoiled rotten.
Spoiler alert.
Welcome and welcome back, everybody. This is Daniel. This is Spoiled Rotten. I am very happy to have my good friends Victor and Courtney back on the show. Feel like you guys have been on a couple of times each. I've enjoyed it each time, and while Ben is away, I wanted to have some cool people on this episode so we could revisit Black Panther: Wakanda Forever. So thank you very much for being here, Victor and Courtney.
So happy to be here. Can't wait to get started.
Yeah.
Yes.
Perfect.
Thank you for the invite.
Yeah. So I guess usually what happens here is I try and see how the movie worked for you on a revisit. So I'll just go around. Courtney, how was it this time around for you?
It was interesting. This one was, I want to say, my fourth time maybe watching this film, and this one, maybe the mood I was in, it didn't quite work as well as it has in the past. I think I really saw the kind of piecemeal way that it kind of got put together, and obviously due to Chadwick's death. But for some reason this time I really noticed certain things where it's kind of like, oh, that's a little off. But I still enjoy the film. I think Ryan Coogler is a fantastic filmmaker, but I wouldn't say it's like top tier Coogler.
No. Yeah, I mean, sorry, I just shouldn't have given away how I feel. Victor, how about you? How did it go this time around?
I'm coming in with a hot take. I like this one better than Black Panther one.
Okay. I'm
Yeah.
glad we're here. All right. This is good.
I love the character dynamics of Black Panther. I love the world building, but I don't love it as an action movie. I think him being Iron Man in a CGI suit kind of takes away the action elements I always grew up reading about in the Black Panther comics. And I feel like they just take the world building and the relationships to another level in this film. And like action beat for action beat, I would rather sit and watch like the fight on the bridge or Shuri fighting Namor on the island over anything that happened in the first Black Panther movie. I just soaked it all up and I just had a fun time checking it out for like the fifth time.
All right. I feel like we all are seeing this for around the same time, probably 4 or 5 as well. I think, yeah, this time I very specific storyline, like the Val and what's that guy's name again? It's Martin Freeman character. I never remember his name.
Ross.
Oh,
Everett Ross.
Everett Ross. I think that one really weighed on me this time around. And so yeah, I found it myself not keeping it. It didn't keep my attention as much this time, but yeah, we'll get into it more. But I do think this was the first time where I was just like, yeah, I guess maybe I was a bit high on it initially, but I think overall, I think you both make good points. So I'm happy to get into this. I guess if anyone hasn't watched Black Panther: Wakanda Forever, the movie is Wakanda and specifically Shuri recovering from the loss of T'Challa and just the uncertainty of whether or not she's going to make the new Purple Herb and become the Black Panther, who's going to become the Black Panther, all while Namor is coming from Talokan and basically being like, hey, since you told the world about Vibranium and Wakanda, they're coming looking around, they came to us, and that can't happen. So those are the stakes. Namor is going to kill a bunch of people if things aren't sorted out. They have to kill one specific person, Riri Williams, to keep everyone else safe. So yeah, that's kind of what's set up in this movie. And I do think that unlike the first one, there's a lot more going on. There's a lot more moving pieces. I feel like the first one is a lot more streamlined. And so yeah, mileage may vary for people in terms of how well that works as a follow up to a streamlined movie like Black Panther. So yeah, where do you guys want to kind of dive in terms of characters, beats, or anything like that?
I mean, I think this film is an extraordinary feat given the circumstances they were working with. This was actually supposed to be a father-son story about,
Yeah.
you know, Black Panther and his son going off and spending time together and bonding. And they kept a lot of elements, like Namor was always going to be a big part of this film and the Battle of Atlantis versus Wakanda.
Hmm.
But the fact that they were able to like pivot in such a drastic way and still tell such a compelling story with Shuri and the rest of the Wakandan characters, I just thought um, not a lot of filmmakers could have made it look, it wasn't perfect, but not a lot of filmmakers could have made it work as well as it did. I think it's just a testament to Coogler's filmmaking skills.
Yes, I definitely agree. I think the first time I talked about it on the podcast, I, and this is with the context that I think T'Challa is a great protagonist in the first movie. I find that Shuri is a more dynamic and so more interesting protagonist to follow because she's dealing with this seething anger and grief. Uh, so I think it feels like Ryan reacting to some of the criticisms of the first one and giving you a character that is it's much easier and it's not as subdued. It's a much easier thing to relate to, which is this anger, and which then gets me thinking about Shuri being like the smartest person. She can take care of anything. That's what she did in the first one. It's what she does somewhat in Infinity War. So it's this anger of like she can do all that stuff, but when it comes to saving her brother, she can't do it. And I thought that was a really good way of keeping me on board throughout the movie. Really honing in on that anger and the conversations between her and Ramonda of the different ways they grieve and how that serves them and doesn't serve them was all really good stuff. In addition to, yeah, I agree, the action pieces or the action set pieces do feel better in this movie. Maybe it's because you don't have the Black Panther in all of them and it's more people outside of a suit, but I do think they are more interesting to look at. So it does feel like a more engaging film that way.
It's funny because I don't know if I like the action set pieces more than the first one.
Okay.
Because that in the first one when they're in that underground
Oh, the
parlor,
casino?
the casino,
Yeah.
that action sequence, like that lives in my head rent free.
That is a great
From
sequence.
the
Yeah.
minute when they walk in to when you have okay, on her, I think it was on like the roof of a car or something. Like it
Mm-hmm.
was just
Mm-hmm.
so much going on. Like I think that's still one of my favorite action beats in any Marvel film. But I will agree with you in the sense that for me, what makes this film work is the way how it approaches grief and anger. And
Mm-hmm.
it's not just that you are mourning T'Challa. You're also like Coogler layers on the grief. Like he gives you ample reason,
Mm-hmm.
bumps off a key character that he didn't really need to. But you bumps off a character who's already dealing with her own grief and dealing with the weight of a kingdom,
Mm-hmm.
when the king is gone. And I thought that added to the whole political dynamic of everything really worked for me. Like I thought that stuff was great. And one of the things I like about the Black Panther franchise is Coogler has a way of really making compelling villains
Mm-hmm.
that you, I don't want to say you want to root for, but you understand.
Yeah.
Oh, I
Their
wanted to
Definitely.
plan.
root for Namor.
What's
You
that?
did.
I
You did
wanted
want
to
to wait for
root for
them.
Namor. Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like even with I always felt that his plan was flawed. There was no way that he was going to be able to execute that plan, especially in a world where you have Avengers and whatnot. Like no one's just going to let him do what he wants to do. But I understood exactly the motivations for it. I understood
Mm-hmm.
the rage, and I feel in this film in particular, Fury's rage and Namor's rage are stuff that you understand. It's stuff that makes perfect sense. Even when Ramonda is yelling at her top general, basically saying,
That's one of my favorite scenes.
I stood by you while you betrayed me. I have the foreign people trying to betray me in front of my face, doing the
Mm-hmm.
whole civility, but they're just trying to steal our resources. Like, how much more do you want me to take and just kind of sit, take it lying down? And all of that stuff, I find it was really well put together. I think some of my issues with it is the other stuff, like as you mentioned the Ross and Valentina
Mm-hmm.
aspect, and that for me that didn't work because it also felt like you were kind of setting up something down the line. Anytime this film kind of pauses to set up other possible franchises, I feel like that's where the film kind of falters a bit.
So just briefly, I think since you brought it up, the what I don't care for in this is when it comes to Val and Ross is I thought the first movie did a good job of focusing on its black characters and letting it be about them, and making them a former married couple gave them a bit too much interiority. Like it just there was a bit too much focus on that as like a funny beat that didn't feel necessary. I think Val is necessary because she represents like just that exchange with her and Ross where he's like, "Can you imagine what we would do if we had this?" And she's like, "I dream about that." Like I think that's important to keep in the movie, that that Americans, but generally the West, are like, like we need that, and to make it clear, they need it because they're going to do some terrible things with it, not because they think they can use it better and protect people better. It's like, no, I want to do that and take out all of the competition. I think that's important. But just the weird, like that moment where he lies and pretends he's on the phone with a lover, and I'm like, I don't need this. Like he's getting a bit too much play here. He should be in this sparingly. The Val stuff to an extent makes sense. And yeah, the Riri Williams stuff, what I like about it is that it shows that the characters learned from the Killmonger thing of like, well, we can't just be like she's American, doesn't matter. Like even in the I almost called it a terrible thing, but like there's the council scene where like, yeah, kill her, and Ramon is like, we can't do that. I appreciated that there was some understanding of like how they went wrong in the past and how they need to keep reaching out and looking out for people who look like them. Um, but yeah, it also comes off like, yeah, I can't wait till the Ironheart show, I guess, because but it was nice that it was like she's there and it's important as an idea that they want to protect her because it's not just another Wakandan. It is someone that's not related to them, but is, and they can't have another Killmonger situation on their hands. Victor, how about you?
Yeah, I mean, that doesn't bother me at all. Like the very first time I ever read a comic with Black Panther in it, I was reading like a Captain America comic and he showed up, right? Comics have always had a history of people crossing over and setting up
Mm-hmm.
the thing down the line. And I mean, Black Panther was first introduced in Civil War, where he just came in and stole the show.
Yep.
And that was very, setting the stage for the Black Panther franchise. So I think Daniel, you said it perfectly. This encapsulates the theme of the first movie of should we just like be singular and guard ourselves, or should we be an extension and reach out and uplift the people around us? So I think it fits tonally in that you're just extending the comic book world, which is something we love about
Mm-hmm.
the MCU, and then thematically it's on point as well.
Yes, I think earlier on I was a bit shakier on Ironheart, but this time around it worked better just because I felt like, as you said, it is important that you see that growth from our main characters. I think it really was just the Val and Ross stuff that didn't work this time, but for some reason it really stuck out as opposed to before, where it's kind of like, it's just a bit of an annoyance. Um, and yeah, Okoye I think is one of my favorite MCU characters. Period. So the fact that there's so much for her to do in this, and we spend that time with her, like having that throne room scene. Um, I'm glad that held up for me because that was something that really was important for me the first time around. The what ends up in Ramonda saying, "Have I not given everything?" But just the exchange they're having in general. I'm glad that still plays for me today, even though I know where it's going. I thought that it really worked, and it's part of the reason why I still really like the movie because it's giving us more of a Koye, and putting her in a kind of a bad light, as you mentioned. It's Ramona being like, yeah. So remember when you let me flee to the Jabari and you stood by Killmonger? Like you're still here, so don't talk to me about what's fair and what's not fair.
I think just getting back to the crossover thing for a minute, I actually liked the introduction of Riri.
Mm-hmm.
I do normally have a problem with the way how Marvel introduces its characters and crossovers. Like I had a real problem with Black Panther being thrown into Civil War, even though, as
Interesting.
Victor says, he steals the show because Civil War was touted as Spider-Man's finally coming to the MCU. And it was almost like Black Panther was treated as an afterthought. And then he kind of steals the show there. And I still believe that even though they made the first film, Marvel didn't really have the push behind it. I don't think they expected Black Panther to be as big as it was. Like,
Yeah.
they didn't have the toys ready. They didn't have a lot of stuff when that thing blew up the way it did. And even before Black Panther, I had issues with, Black Widow kind of always being pushed aside
Mm.
before she finally got her film. Like I feel like the politics of Marvel's business ethics in terms of when it comes to making films doesn't quite work the same way as with comic books when you can just have people show up because there's all this kind of setup you have to do. But the one, so as much as I enjoyed Rerun, the one I was talking about in terms of like the setting up other things that didn't work outside of the Ross Valentina stuff was Anika. She's kind of introduced and they kind of
Mm.
set it up like you're gonna get this Wakanda side story, either a movie or TV show with this particular character, but I felt like they didn't really do a good job of establishing her. She has
She
a couple
does
of fun scenes, but like there wasn't much about her that I could walk away going, "Oh yeah, she's gonna be, a key part in this world." Like it just felt kind of tacked on. Whereas I enjoyed more stuff with like Namor and Shuri and their interaction, the way how they're seeing both the similarities in their worlds, but at the same time, Namor's like, I will destroy your world if it means
Mhm.
protect it. Like that to me was far more interesting than them trying to like say, oh, we've got this possible other thing that may or may not come down the line.
Interesting. Well, yeah, I feel like because that's the Michaela Cole character, right?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do feel like she was. It was like, oh, who's she gonna be? And then I saw the movie. I was like, I mean, she's there for sure. I mean, it does feel like she fell victim to a lot of cuts that just didn't want to think. But yeah, I guess because of what you said, like being so on board with Namor and Atlantis Telecom, that I was kind of like, I mean, this is some good new stuff too. Because I feel like it's his cousins or whatever, like the two like main foot soldiers he has.
Atuma and Namora.
That's
Oh,
the
no more.
one.
Yeah, yeah.
Namor and Otuma. There we go. Yeah, those I thought like those characters were great. So I was just like, yeah, there's new stuff here that I don't know where they're going. I mean, it would have been nice to have seen Namor or have him hinted at before now, like seeing him again. But maybe he's just going to live in the Black Panther universe. Yeah, I just was really impressed with how they pulled that off. And as you said, like Killmonger, you are all in isn't the right way to put it, but like just you understand where he's coming from, and it leaves room for people to be like, oh, I agree with this person, even though ultimately they are the bad guys. But it is nice to have a complicated bad guy.
I mean, this is a 2.5 hour movie
Mm-hmm.
and it just zips by. It does not drag at all. I've seen it 5 times and I never feel like there's really a slow part where I just want to get to the next scene. And I think that's a testament to just uh how rich the characters and the world building are, and that you can spend so much of the movie with the antagonist and it's just as compelling. And when it switches back to Cherie, it's like I want to see what Namor's doing still, right? Like it's just an incredible feat.
I agree with that. I do think that I never feel like, oh, can we gotta, because it's like 2 hours and 40 minutes if you're staying for like the post credits and stuff. So it is it is a good chunk of your time you're committing to, and I've in how many ever times I've seen it, I've never been like, oh, I should just skip this part or just like I can tune out here. I'm engaged the whole time. Outside of, as I mentioned, I didn't love the Rothwell stuff, but that's whatever. I think overall the movie is stronger than those two parts, bringing it down a bit.
I mean, I don't know about you guys, but I would happily watch an Nakia spin-off movie. I would watch an Okoye spin-off movie, an M'Baku spin-off movie. Pretty
Mm-hmm.
much like every character in this film, I'd be happy to spend another 2 hours with. And I can't say that about a lot of other film franchises.
I do think the care is put into these characters. There may be doubt about that, but for me, there's no doubt about it. The care is put into these characters where you would want to follow them for sure.
Yeah, and I think it speaks to Coogler in terms of you feel watching both Wakanda Forever and Black Panther, you feel his stamp as a director and how
Hmm.
he like to Victor's point, there's so many MCU films that I enjoy, but the villains are so cookie cutter.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, you're whatever, Yellow Jackets, Ant-Man in reverse, you know, but like there's just I understand that's how they were written in the comics, kind of lack of imagination. But there's really outside of maybe Thanos, I guess Loki, but Loki's now to that point where I would say I see him more as like a good character than a bad one. There's not
Hmm.
really that many villains in the MCU that you can really think about their motives outside of world domination or whatever. Like even Thanos destroying the population had an interesting philosophical view
Hmm.
to it that you
I
go, oh, okay, that's interesting. But a lot of these other guys, like Ronan the Destroyer,
no,
I
he
can
is the
nothing,
perfect.
right?
Both Captain Marvel, like I think both Captain Marvel movies, the first Guardians, those are villains where you're like, this it doesn't matter. We're here for the protagonist.
Mhm.
I will throw it out there. It's still related to Black Panther. I am a big Zemo fan. I think that that idea that he
Interesting. Okay.
had where he well just because people always talk about movies where the villain wins, like he
Yeah.
won. He got what he wanted out of
Yeah,
it.
yeah.
And then they had to come get him later and work with him. He didn't have to change anything about himself. He was just like, "Hey, I got what I wanted out of this and now you're coming to me for help." I appreciated just that concept of like I'm going to make you guys hate each other. I'm not going to try and hurt you. I'm just going to make it so that you are a like they still haven't got back together. The Avengers are still not a
Mhm.
thing since
Yeah.
2016. I really like that, and he is connected to T'Challa because that's who T'Challa is trying to kill throughout the movie, and he has to realize, yeah, I can't feed into that. I'm not going to let you feed into this, but
Mhm.
um, I think yeah, I'm a big Killmonger fan. I think Thanos the discourse kind of got away from the original things I liked about him, so I can't really blame him for that. But Thanos, Killmonger, and Zemo are villains that I really enjoyed, and I think they are all like, yeah, things have to change because things are bad, and I really like that. But Namor is also someone that I think if he came back another time could be very interesting uh, to explore. I think he's just the way the movie ends with him being like, they need me now. Like this is
Mhm.
you think that I'm showing weakness, but they need me now. So this is good, and they will like they're gonna protect us, but they also need us. So this is good stuff.
Yeah. He's willing to swallow some of his pride. He's
Hmm.
thinking about the long game and defending his people rather than his own ego, which is impressive for a quote villain.
Yeah, I think what it comes down to for me in terms of villains, the same thing with Killmonger is they are saying the right things, like or mostly Killmonger saying the right things. But I do know that ultimately he wasn't about helping because he destroyed the purple herb, which he could have given to everyone and made them on equal footing, and then they could have actually done something. But he was clearly just trying to consolidate power, and he says, "I'll kill anyone that looks like you. I'll kill anyone that even likes you." So he wasn't really for uplifting people. And Namor is like, oh, the surface people need to pay, and you're like, yeah, overall yes, but it's also kind of like, at what cost though, because you're killing a bunch of people that you could work with or help you, and so you're not coming at it the right way. So that's what I like about it, is there's still room for me to see him changing, whereas I like Killmonger was kind of like, no, just kill me because I'm never going to be the good guy. I'm not going to be what you want me to, just kill me. And I love that he came back in this movie to like double down on that point of like, I'm here because you're angry like I was angry. We both know that this is not a productive thing. We just want to burn this all down.
I feel though with Namor, even though they leave that room for growth and change, I always took the notion of, oh, they're gonna need me as, not just that we've ingrained ourselves with them, but if I need to put that knife in the back, it's a lot easier to do it when you're right up close to them, right? Like I
Yeah.
never walked away from this film going, oh, maybe he's finally come around. I'm like, nah, he could still like I don't feel he's
I
fully
mean, he said,
committed
"I'll
to
kill
the
your mom,"
cause
and he
yet.
did it. Like he
Yeah,
really did
Yeah.
kill her. I was like,
yeah.
"Geez, all right." Like this guy's serious.
I
After
mean,
giving a whole speech about his mother and what she went through and how it
Hmm.
hurts. And it's like, if I got to kill your mom, well, c'est la vie. And I'm like, that's cold, man. Like
Yeah.
you're
I
going
mean,
to that villain ranking.
the Submariner has always been one of the biggest dicks in Marvel
Sure.
Comics, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And even when they're both Avengers, like no one really gets along with him. He always does his own thing. That's what makes him so interesting. And he flip-flops back and forth. I think when he debuted back in like the 40s, he was a straight up villain. And in the decades since, he kind of goes back and forth. But yeah, you never really know where he's coming from. He's always looking out for himself first. And if that happens to align with the greater good, so be it.
Hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's what I was trying to leave room for, even though in this movie, yeah, you're kind of like, I guess he's just a bad guy. But I was trying to leave room for, like, comics wise, you could see him briefly working with a hero if need be.
Well, you know, the next thing he's bound to do is go after Reed Richards' woman. That's
Yes, that
inevitable too,
is.
right?
Well, and I mean, I know that people, it's like in poor taste. People are like, I mean, this Reed Richards is Pedro Pascal, so it's like this Sue Storm will have a type in this universe. It was
Yeah.
like it's not a far reach at this point. Like that kind of casting does lead you to be like, I mean, that would be, you could go from Pedro to is his name Tenoch Huerta.
Yeah.
I never know if it's like
Yeah.
Tenoch or Tenoch, but
I've
Tenoch
heard it
Huerta.
both ways.
Yeah. I do think that the performance there is great, and as you said, it's Atuma and Namora. Those are also interesting characters. I liked Atuma just having that thing with Okoye, like their little back and forth. That they didn't speak the same language at first, but they were clearly speaking the same language in terms of fighting each other, and that was a very cool connection they had.
There's something interesting in their first fight scene on the bridge and the way how he's kind of sizing up her abilities as his
Yeah, he's just walking
henchmen
around and observing as she's fighting
are
everyone else.
fighting. And
Yeah.
then when he comes in, he's got, I guess, the physical advantage
Hmm.
to a certain extent, but not necessarily the skill or cunning that she does. So it adds to like a really interesting dynamics. And then at the end of the day, you still know like dude's got a water bomb if he needs to drop it at
Yeah.
any point, right? Like he's just because of the environment and they're surrounded by water. He's immediately got the upper hand in that particular battle.
And he calls her warrior, right? Like it's not a particularly demeaning thing he's calling her. He's just
Hmm.
like, yeah, man, like it's you and me, warrior. Let's do this. There is a level of respect there of like, she's worth my time. I'm gonna. We're not friends, but she's worth my time to fight her because she's obviously got what it takes.
And that's one of the things really like about both Black Panther films is the women are badass
Yes.
and
Yeah.
not in a way where, I know a lot of people had issue with the end game women unite scene where the
Yeah.
women, whereas this one is like, from the very beginning, they let you know that the women are going to be running Wakanda forever.
Hmm.
Obviously, Chadwick's not here. We're going to let them shine, but they were shining in the first one, all right? Like it's when I
They're
think
so good. I love the
to the
Dora Milaje.
MCU, there's a lot of great female characters, but a lot of them haven't gotten the shine that the Wakanda women have because they just haven't been written well enough, right? They're always kind of introduced as a secondary thought to whoever the male character is.
Hmm.
Whereas even though you go to see Black Panther, the first one, you're immediately taken by the women.
And
His army, you're like, oh damn, they're badass. Like it's just it
even a
was
character
refreshing to
like
see.
Io, even a character like
Hmm.
Io who's in Civil War, and you're like, that's a memorable scene where she's like, I'm gonna tell you to move, Black Widow, like get out of the way. And then when she comes back again in Falcon and the Winter Soldier, like I feel like that's a high point where you're like, oh wait, it's Io, she's back. Like I, and she's not, when you're watching a Black Panther movie, like either one of them, she's not like a real focus, but it is something where it's like they gave her room to shine in other non Black Panther related properties, which is cool, and it shows the care that they put into these characters. Um, let's talk about Nakia. I guess I think Victor, you said earlier you would watch a spinoff of her. I think this time around, I never didn't like Nakia, but this time around I was really taken with Nakia. Um, this watch through. I just appreciated that it was like Ramonda needed someone to get something done. Unfortunately, it wasn't Okoye, who was a character I really like. It was like, yeah, sorry, Nakia, you got to do it because you're gonna actually get this done, and she gets it done. She gets Shuri back, and so I was just really like, yeah, I really underestimate how well uh presented she is and how effective she is as a character.
As soon as she steps on screen, it's like Wakanda Forever turns into a James Bond movie. She's
Hmm.
just this badass super spy, can speak every language, kick ass. She's good at counterintelligence.
Hmm.
Yeah, it's just a blast watching her go in there and get everything done.
Right. Yes. I forgot. I said that just thinking about the actual mission, but it's like all the work she puts in beforehand, being able to
Yeah,
speak. I think they're saying like that's like a forgotten language that she's able to speak when she's like like just outside of Telecon, and in real life we know Lupita can speak Spanish, so she's speaking Spanish in the movie. But then that extra language as well, just as you said, just she's and I feel like you get that James Bond vibe in the first one as well because she's the one that gets him into the Korean casino and they all know
right.
her and stuff. And I guess her first scene where she's undercover and she's like, "Oh, you blew my cover, you blew my mission. What are you doing?" So yeah, she's just really cool, and this is a me thing. I sometimes forget how cool of a character she is.
She also has the most important line in the movie, when she's talking to, I think it was Cherie, and at one point she just flat out says, "I couldn't go on like nothing happened," and that was like a meta moment of the cast and filmmaker saying like, "This was really hard for us to do," right? They actually like
Yeah.
put that text into the film, and you just see the weight of everybody's experience having to soldier on through this movie after losing their brother in Chadwick, and you really feel it in that scene. You feel her acting prowess.
Yes. Yeah. I think just the way she goes, like to everyone, he's like the king. He's the Black Panther, but he's my everything. He's my T'Challa. Like I can't. I'm not even gonna try and do it the way she did. It works every time. Like
Yeah.
the emotion that she puts into it that's believable as the character, and I'm sure we know as the actor that it's equally upsetting for her.
And one of the things I like about her outside of just her sheer skill and talents is she's another reminder that the characters are so distinct in this universe. Like
Hmm.
everyone kind of has a specialty, but it doesn't necessarily confine them to that one thing. But also, you go to Wakanda and you know that there's different people who are great at different things. You have
Hmm.
people that are great at science, some people that could do the James Bond stuff, some people that are just straight strategists, war generals, what have you. And it's interesting to see all of that come together in this world. Mbaku has one of my favorite lines where he's talking to Shuri and he's basically like, um, the queen might reward you like Nakia and basically send you away from the
Hmm.
the kingdom. So I'm like, even a moment like that where you could bring in humor and it's like, oh, because we know the relationships and just what each person does. It's a funny line, but also her being sent away, even if it is to hide a child, what have you. She's a spy. Like her being sent away is not really punishment because she can adapt to any
Yeah.
any situation,
Yeah.
right? And I think that's one of the cool things about this world, whereas in other MCU films, it's kind of like you got the hero, you maybe got the sidekick. Like take Ant-Man for example, you got his little crew of sidekicks that are comic
Hmm.
relief, but like everyone's kind of cookie cutter in terms of their roles. Where here it's like everyone's super diverse, and that's why you can follow any of them and be like, oh, what's going on here? Where's Daniel Kaluuya's character? Is he still banished? Like, just you're
I
interested
love that they
in
addressed it.
people like that,
It's that's a great moment because people are like, hey, come on, she almost killed her husband, and it's like he's still alive. She can go see him whenever she
Yes.
wants. Like,
Yeah.
I thought that was great. Yeah, I think even the going into the movie before people saw it, people being like, "So who's the Black Panther in this one?" Because obviously they give the reveal that there is a Black Panther in this. The fact that people were like, "Oh, it could be this person," shows how much care is given to the characters because you couldn't really tell anyone they were dumb for thinking it was one. It's like, I mean, yeah, like this could go anywhere. if you read the comics, there's a very obvious answer, but it's like if you're just enjoying the movies, you could be like, hey, it could be Okoye, it could be this person, it could be this person, because that's there's enough there for people to latch on to their favorites, but also recognize the power of all these different characters. And I think that is something that should be commended. I think that I know that I've seen other people kind of dismiss this as it's just the movie they did to get over Chadwick Boseman, but I do think that it is a continuation of a story that people fell in love with, and I don't think they dropped the ball. They obviously made a very purposeful decision, but it's not the end. Like there could be more to this, and I appreciated that they took the time to grieve, especially the order in which it came out. This was the time where all the films were about grief to a certain degree, so it made sense for this one.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I appreciate the most about this is that they didn't just recast Chadwick's character, and I knowing reading the comics was like, sure, it should be the next
Mm-hmm.
Black Panther. And I know there's a lot of people who disagree with that, what have you, but I like the fact that they didn't just go, he died, we'll put a little for Chadwick at the beginning or the end and move on. Like they acknowledge that, hey, this guy was a key part of not only our universe in front of the screen, but behind the screen, we all loved him,
Mm-hmm.
and we're not the type of people that just goes, well, we got to make money. Let's move on. Like we need to
I
acknowledge grief. And I like the fact that I can go see an MCU film that's actually talking about grief. I know Endgame kind of does it a little bit at the beginning with the people disappearing, but
Yeah,
like this
yeah.
one really goes, you know what? Grief is not only about losing someone, it's about the anger that it causes within you.
Yes,
And as
exactly.
you started off, Daniel, talking about these people are heroes. They are saving the world, but they can't save the one they love.
Mm-hmm.
No matter how much smarts, technology, what have you, that is gut-wrenching. And how do you move forward with stuff like that? Like I actually love that about this film and even Black Panther in general. One of the things I love about the first one is it makes me think about not only the world of the film, but the world that I live in, which I don't get from a lot of MCU films. Like it's great to go and see heroes fight each other and what have you, but I need that substance every once in a while, like, something that really kind of connects me. And I think that this is what this franchise does that so many other Marvel films fail is that type of connection that it brings.
Yeah, I would agree, and I just wanted to stay on the recasting of it because I do know it is a hot topic. I'm definitely someone that did not want them to recast. In general, I was just like, I don't think I feel like that would be weird to recast. But then you listen to the interviews, and it's like, yeah, I understand that. They're like, even if we did, that's not fair to the person stepping in. Like, we're never gonna look at him like we look at Chad. But Victor, how did you feel about recasting, not recasting?
I'm torn about it because you have movies and then you have something that comes along and it's the movie, and people are going to be talking about Black Panther and the experience of seeing it for a generation, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
it is Star Wars to a generation. And Chadwick, he was the man. He played every iconic Black character who
Yeah.
mattered. And I'm sure if you ask Chadwick, and I've heard people reference this, like he would have preferred if someone kept the role alive. And T'Challa meant so much to so many people who deserve to see his arc carry forward over several more films, right? Like we
Mm-hmm.
got robbed of one of the great characters of our generation. It would be like after Star Wars if Mark Hamill died and you just took Luke Skywalker out of the film. But I mean, I understand it for the cast, for the fans, like to actually have to show up to work every day and work with someone who's replacing that person who meant so much to you. Like it's an impossible situation.
Yeah.
So you can't have your cake and eat it too. I understand the way they went that they did, and I love this movie. I love the way they turned it into a story about grief, a superhero movie that actually pulled at your heartstrings and meant something. But part of me would like to have seen what would have happened with the T'Challa we fell in love with from Civil War.
Yeah. I do understand that. I think I've seen a lot of people talk about it, and I think I've always just stuck on like I appreciate that they didn't that Chadwick's contribution wasn't as disposable as, oh, that's too bad. I guess let's move on. But I understand when people say that that version of T'Challa was really important, and it would be nice to know that you're continuing that arc, even if it's with a different actor. I just feel like it's good that he's not that. Maybe that's what people don't want, but it's like, but Chadwick won't be forgotten because there is that hole there that they can't get around within any of those conversations. And yeah, he's got a son that's going to grow up into it. Maybe they'll do a time jump. I don't know, but it's like it will still keep him alive in that sense, and I appreciate that. And I think maybe it was just timing for me that by the time I was reading the comics and the movie was coming, like before it came out, it was like, yeah, Shuri's currently the Black Panther because T'Challa is dead in the comics as well. And I was like, it's upsetting that that's really happening in real life, but it's like they've got a blueprint for how to do this, and if they wanted to recast, which it doesn't seem like they would, they still could bring him back later because that's also how that arc works, is that he comes back from the land of the dead. So like, I appreciated that they took the time with this movie, um, and still feel like they might still get pressured into recasting at some point. But at least we had this movie to acknowledge the grief and have these characters as well as the actors go through something and help people process it.
I think that with this franchise in particular, like I understand people want to have the characters that you love in as many stories as possible, but there's part of me that wishes, especially from a pop culture standpoint, that we allowed for a little more change. We don't need 28 some odd James Bond films, right? Like, we can occasionally have a different character. And I feel like the way how at least this film establishes it with the plant kind of being synthesized now, you could have different people assume
Mm-hmm.
that costume, and whether it be a son, whether Killmonger comes back from multiverse or whatever, it is good now. Like there's different ways that you can do it. I was thinking about this watching the film because I had recently showed my son Spider-Man 2, the
Okay.
Tobey Maguire one, and I was talking to him because he had not seen any of the Spider-Man live action ones before that, but he did see Deadpool and Wolverine, and there was characters in that from other film universes, and I was realizing like there's a lot of explaining that we have to do, and with these comic book films, especially for different generations, and you have to be like, well, this guy played Spider-Man for these three, and then this other actor played Spider-Man, and then the Tom Holland Spider-Man that he can like, there's just
Yeah.
it's always like this, the character still remains the same. Like you could have 50 different ones, and it's like, well, you get something like Into the Spider-Verse, just as an example, which it's animated, what have you. But it's like, oh, you can have different people in this world,
Mm-hmm.
and you can
More than just
play
Miles. Like it's just
exactly. You can
different.
play
Yeah,
with
there's
the
different story.
boundaries of this. I feel like we often get stuck with, we need to have Iron Man. We need to have Robert Downey Jr. in the MCU.
Yeah.
He's great as Iron Man. People love him. We're gonna bring him back as Doctor Doom. It's like you could have brought anyone back as Doctor Doom. Like, why do we need to keep seeing the same faces over and over, and like the same type of characters over and over? Like, especially when the hero wears a mask, you can make
Yeah.
anyone that, right? And I
Yeah.
and I just feel like in terms of creativity, it would be a little more interesting for me just because, we how many Marvel comics have there been, and how many decades has Marvel, DC, whatever, been around as an institution, and yet we still want like the same kind of story told the exact same way. And I'm like, no, give me different people. Like we had Chadwick, that's great. Now we got Shuri. Whether or not it's the kid, whether it's Shuri growing, or you bring some other curveball in with the multiverse, what have you, that's cool. As long as we have this world of Wakanda, still at the forefront. You've got all these cool black men and women doing really great superhero stuff
Mm-hmm.
and growing as a culture. Like I'm there for it.
I
Yeah.
mean, the MCU has been a blessing and a curse for superhero movies. the beauty of a comic is you pick up a comic and anything can happen. Like these stories,
Hmm.
they carry on for generations, characters come and go, different writers tackle the property, and then you have like all these multiverses where different things happen. And when the MCU showed up on the scene, it was like a long-running TV series where the stories carry forward, the characters carry forward, but also as it embraced comic books and the creativity, it kind of flattened everything out, and then everything had to be synthesized into this very particular MCU style, and you can't have that much variance anymore. You're not going to get a story like Into the Spider-Verse in the MCU. Um, I think like there should be a little pocket universe where they're finding interesting directors and giving them 20, 30, 40 million dollars to like go make a Blade movie for 20 million dollars. Go make an A24 style psychological horror with the Scarlet Witch. Like there's so many different ways we can be experiencing these characters, and the MCU's kind of like made a default of what's expected and what you can do. I do wish we had a little bit more side pocket universes where they could play around, kind of like the What If series. And even the
Yeah,
What If series is very like streamlined in the MCU house style.
yeah. I was surprised by What If, because I felt like, okay, here we go. This is where they're gonna get. And then for the first bit of the first season, I was like, oh, it's just the movies again, but one thing changed.
Yeah.
I liked the second season a bit better, but I would still agree with Victor that it's still like it's it is fun because you're like, oh, I know this from the MCU, and they're doing a riff, but it was interesting to introduce a new character. I'm pretty sure Whole Cloth, and I can't remember her name, but um, it, yeah, just introducing a new character there and going different places. I don't know what this third season is going to be. I saw the trailer and I'm like, they're closing it out, so I guess they're done having fun with that idea.
Yeah.
Um, but I do think that Disney Plus was their chance to try something different. Um, and I think Agatha is something a bit different. Uh, WandaVision was a good start in terms of trying to be different, but yeah, there's just like, and I'm not saying I don't like these things, but then it got very entrenched in the house style for
It's like
most
low
of it.
budget MCU,
Yeah, for
pretty
most of it.
much.
And I like, yeah, and I really liked Falcon and Winter Soldier for different reasons, but I really liked it. But it's that one really suffered because it was so clear they needed it to feel like an MCU movie. They weren't really willing to let it be its own thing. So there's a bunch of edits and cuts that don't really make sense in it. But
Yeah.
I really appreciated what it was going for. We're not talking about that, but I liked it, and I was hoping to get more of what I liked about it. To be clear, was the exploration of, to me, what felt like black people and their how the American experience is them being asked to be like a part of their own oppression, and just there were so many great details in it that felt like, yeah, I don't think they would be able to do this in a movie, not because they wouldn't be allowed, but just because this time frame gives them enough time to put in these details. But then there's the whole like, well, we gotta have what's her face, Peggy's niece in this, and so we're gonna do this, and it's not really gonna make sense. Um, but yeah, I like that, and so this movie, Wakanda Forever, felt. I think Courtney already said it, but like it felt like they were actually taking time to do something different and not um, do the house style per se. And that's maybe why the Val and Ross stuff irked me a bit more this time, because it does feel like it's encroaching with the house style versus the what I liked about the movie and how it felt. Like, I think they were very clear. Like, this movie got the budget it deserved, so they were actually putting their effort into this one. Whereas the first one, I guess they're like, I guess we got to do a Black Panther movie, and it was great, but it was like, yeah, like they put it out like a couple months before Infinity War, obviously thinking Infinity War is going to be the big draw here this year. And I think I heard they had to be like, whoa, 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 don't kill Black Panther in Infinity War, don't kill him. And it was like too late, trains left the station. Um, so yeah, this was them getting the support they needed and being able to tell a story that doesn't need to, set Black Panther up for something in the next movie. It was like we are actually going to dig into this and the grief here. So I do appreciate that. I think that should always be respected about these two movies. That it felt like they got to take their time and do what they wanted to do.
Yeah, and I think the fact that in some ways they were both kind of underestimated. The
Mm-hmm.
first one definitely they did not expect it to do the numbers it did, and I think this one they were expecting big things, but then Chadwick's death happens and they have to pivot, and then they're like, okay, well, let them do their thing, but again, we're not quite sure how this is going to play out. But I think it also speaks to Marvel being, or at least the MCU being a victim of its own success. To your point, Daniel, and what Victor was saying as well, there was a time when the MCU felt innovative and
Mm-hmm.
fresh, where you could go and see a Captain America film and it felt like a spy movie. You had Guardians felt like,
Yeah.
space Star Wars. Like they felt like different things that just happened to be superhero films. And then after Avengers, like the money came in so much that they started to follow that formula. And even with the TV universe, WandaVision was so different.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it still stands out to this day as one of the
Definitely.
best of their shows because it was so different. And I would even say Loki, when the first season of Loki felt somewhat unique.
Yeah.
But from then on, it was like, okay, let's mass produce, get them out real quick, and try and force them into the standard MCU format. And I'm like, what brought you success was you taking risk. But then you
Mm-hmm.
got too big. And once a company or corporation gets big, they don't want to take any type of risk. They just want more of the same, right? You want your Big Mac the exact same way in Tokyo as you get it in Ohio. And I think that's what's kind of killed some of the momentum
Once they
for
hit those billion
them.
dollar movies where it's
Yeah,
like, wow, even Iron Man 3 hit a billion just because it came out after the Avengers, it's like, all right, well, I guess
exactly.
you get scared when the billion dollar movies stop happening, regardless of the reasons why, in terms of people going to theaters and stuff. It's just like, you get scared. Because I am someone that appreciated that post Endgame, it looked like they were trying to do different things, like
Yeah.
Shang-Chi, um, and other stuff. Not, I mean, I don't love Eternals, but it does feel like they're trying to do something different. And so,
Yeah.
but then it became, oh, none of this is connected. What are they doing? Like they don't know what they're doing. And I'm like, so yeah, like I don't know if that affected them, but that becomes the narrative is that MCU's floundering because not every movie is setting up the next movie. And I was like, but I'm liking that they're kind of like, hey, do you like this? Like we're trying this. Do you like this? Um, and even if not everything worked for me, at least it felt like, hey, they're trying different things. There's different people can like these different things. And now I just keep seeing like, oh yeah, we're bringing Robert Downey Jr. back because there's no way we could possibly fill the role of Doctor Doom with anyone else, or like,
Yeah.
yeah, or just okay, so yeah, we're just gonna do the two movies, and they obviously are doing that because they need them both to be billion-dollar movies each time, and you're just like, oh, that's too bad.
Have either of you guys read a book? It came out last year called MCU. I think it was The Reign of Marvel or The Reign of Marvel Studios. It's
Is
by
that the like
Joanna
Joanna
Robinson.
Robinson? Yeah,
Yes. Yeah, I
I
did read
have
that
not
one
read
this
it,
year.
but because I listen to a lot of her podcasts, I've got bits and pieces here, and I have to read it at some point.
It's going to change your perspective on how these movies get made. And you're going to have a better understanding of why it took them like 20 films to make the first female-led and
Yeah,
black-led films. There's a
Hmm.
lot of politics behind what
because there's
gets
the
made.
Perlmutter guy that was like
Yeah,
absolutely not. Yeah.
it's all about toy sales first and what
Yes.
they could spin
Yeah.
into toys. And just reading through that book, you see how they stumbled into a lot of their success. In hindsight, it looks like everything clicks together perfectly, but they got lucky in a bunch of spots. And
Oh yeah.
yeah, after like 20 films, it's like, trying to drive a train down the tracks and they're throwing the track ahead of the train. Eventually, you're just going to veer off course.
Hmm.
There's reasons for hope, there's reasons for optimism that they'll be able to turn things around, but it's like they set such a high standard anything less than these elite Avengers Endgames movies are going to be a disappointment, right? Like people just don't want to accept something like a Shang-Chi about a street level hero who does kung fu really well, right? Like they kind of back themselves in a corner.
Yeah,
It,
yeah, because as I said, I didn't love everything that came out after, but I was still like, I'm enjoying enough of these to be like, but they got scared, and Victor, you rightfully point out the business decisions that come from that, let alone any creative decision
Yeah.
that can be made within that business. Um, yeah, I who knows what's going to happen there, but I still get excited when when I hear there's going to be a new MCU movie. I can't. I'm like, oh, okay. Let's see what happens next.
I mean, I
I'm up.
loved Werewolf by Night. You know, if I could get one of those a year, I'd be happy.
They should be doing that. I feel like that's if you're gonna stick to this Disney Plus thing, like you should be having like a Halloween special. I'm surprised they didn't do anything this year.
Yeah, like a
That was
black
one
and
that
white.
Hmm.
it's one that I visually liked, but I need to go back to. Because I didn't love it as much as everyone the first time I watched it, and I haven't gone back to it
Oh,
since.
Well, they
But
I'm
re-released
like
it in
you.
color for you. If you
no,
prefer
no,
that.
I love the black and white aspect of it.
Yeah.
Like visually, I thought it was great. I just didn't the character I wasn't that engaged with. But again, it was first viewing, and I think maybe I was expecting something different than what I got. So I'm definitely looking forward to revisiting that one. And I will double back to what Victor was saying about the book MCU because I listened to the audio version of it, and it's great. And to Victor's point, they got so lucky with a lot of things. And I think
Hmm.
as fans, we forget that not every film in phase one, two, three were great. There's some that we routinely forget even
Yep.
are part of there or we just don't watch. But with the post Endgame, everyone acted like every film had to be Endgame level
Hmm.
or Iron Man level. And it's like you forget when they were starting out with Iron Man, they were kind of just individually taking shots and some worked, some didn't. And then they started going, well, hey, maybe we can tie this together. Now everyone expects everything to be tied together. And if it's not tied together to something coming up, then it doesn't work. But I think you get stuff like Doctor Strange, was it Multiverse of Madness?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Where that film feels like it's two different films. One that kind of wants to be an interesting horror film that we haven't really quite seen in the MCU, and the other one's like, oh, we've got to set up 18 different possible films that we're not quite sure yet. And like it doesn't work. Like we need to go back
Hmm.
to just having tell me a good story. Doesn't need to set if you want to put a little teaser thing at the end, that's good. But I'm here for whatever's going on in this world right now. I don't need to be thinking about, oh, this might bring in Kang, whoever
I
else.
I am
I don't
guilty of
need that.
loving Multiverse of Madness, though.
Oh,
I was
no.
really. I think it's because I listened to this other podcast, Blank Check, and so they just happened. I'm obviously not just happened to be. They strategically had their Sam Raimi run leading
Mhm.
up to Multiverse of Madness. So having watched all his movies and then watching this, it was like this exciting thing of like, oh, look at how he's able to like, because my whole thing was you mentioned Spider-Man 2 earlier. It's like, yeah, he hated Spider-Man 3 because it was the studio's hands were all over it, and I was like,
Hmm.
why would he do an MCU movie? Their hands are like. That's gonna be way worse than Sony's hands. Like there's gonna be like the Disney hands, then the MCU hands. Like it's gonna be bad for him. And so it was like these small wins of seeing him be able to do his like camera work or do the scares because obviously they wouldn't let him do a full on Sam Raimi horror. So I was happy about that, but I also liked what the movie was talking about, which is like how much are you willing to give up of your happiness before you start pushing back, which is why I liked the Scarlet Witch villain turn there because it was like yeah, she's lost enough. I buy that she's ready to like burn this all down right now. Um, but yeah, as you said, that it's also the movie where for some reason Charlize Theron is there, and you're like, what? Why did she come here? Look, what a weird setup. And he's got the third eye at the end of it. All that stuff. I'm like, it's whatever. But I I unashamedly like the movie for the Sam Raimi stuff that he was able to get in, and it felt like a bit of redemption after his Spider-Man 3 where he felt bad, but it seems like he hated doing Multiverse of Madness too, so I guess it's not that big of a win.
Yeah, I think if they had allowed him to do just a straight Sam Raimi horror, even if it's like a PG horror thing, because those elements when you're watching, you're like, ah, this is Sam Raimi.
Hmm.
That's when the film's actually quite interesting. But there's so much where it's like, oh no, the studio wants you to put
Yeah.
this in, and oh, you've got to throw this character in or this random universe because it was just too much of that. And I think with Wakanda Forever, maybe because of the success of the first one, maybe because they underestimated Ryan Coogler in terms of like what he can do. These films feel like individually contained stories that yes, there is a through line connection with, some of the elements of the past being referenced in Wakanda Forever, but you could pick either one of those films and sit and go, oh, that's a really satisfying story, even if
Hmm.
they have flaws, what have you, that feels like its own nicely contained world. As I don't feel Shang-Chi kind of does it, but then there's a lot of callbacks in Shang-Chi, and I enjoyed that one. It's, not perfect, but I like what they were attempting to do. I just feel like they don't do that with a lot of their films, and especially the new ones, they were so desperate to try and recreate the magic of the past, especially in cheap TV form, that they kind of lost their way. And then I would say that, at least in my opinion, I feel like they listen to the internet way too much. You guys are
It
powerful
feels like
studio
that.
executives. You have your own flawed visions of what works and what will sell toys, and then you throw in the internet on top of that, and they immediately make some hasty decisions that make no sense, but it's only because the internet was arguing about it one day and they said, "Oh, we can't do this anymore." Like it's a really interesting way to run this corporation.
Victor, anything else you wanted to touch on in the movie?
I mean, the reason I love this film so much and I've watched it so many times is for me, it gets better with each viewing. So after I seen it for the first time in the theater, um, there's like a ton of, I think on Disney Plus, there's a docu-series, like a
Hmm.
four-part docu-series
All
about
the
making
music.
this. They released a podcast, a companion podcast by Ta-Nehisi Coates. And the level of detail that went into fleshing out this world is just incredible. Um, uh, Kugler's longtime collaborator Ludwig Göransson. He did the score for this, and he went so far as to like find out like Mesoamerican instruments that people were buried with hundreds of years ago, and like
Hmm.
pull them out of the earth and like look at the holes on the flute and see which holes they pressed more, just trying to figure out like what this music would have sounded like. Ruth Carter, who is just one of the gifts to our generation, like
Hmm.
the level of detail they went into in the costumes, like she had like a 400-page Bible of like what the characters would look like, what they would wear, how they would move in water. And like you go and you take that in, and this film is just like this is visual art, visual and acoustic art. Like you can turn the sound off and just appreciate the beauty of this and the hundreds and hundreds of people who collaborated in bringing this world to life. Like it is such an incredible feat. I think it won the Oscar for best costume design. But again, like if you just take the time, listen to some podcasts, watch some docu-series on what went into making this film, I appreciate it more with every viewing.
I'm so glad I asked that because I completely forgot to say that one thing I definitely like more than the first movie is the score, and I liked the score in the first movie, but this one, um, before I saw the Ludwig Göransson like docu series, was already like really up there for me, and then as you said, like watching all the artists he brought in and like their sessions, just I'm also just an easy mark for that kind of stuff. Like any type of people watching people make music, I'm like, I'm in.
Yeah.
This is already good for me. So like watching how it made me like certain songs on the soundtrack. I think specifically the one that's during the chase on the bridge, like,
Hmm.
which obviously I get pretty snooty, like it's a score, I don't want to hear anybody on the song, but I was just like, it made me like that song even more just because I saw like what went into doing it. And I did listen to the Ta-Nehisi Coates podcast, which I think also made me like dig my heels in about not recasting. So, but like
Yeah.
it was yeah, the stuff that came out after the fact as well definitely helps either keep your love for it going or find new things to love about it for sure.
I will say, and this might get me in trouble with my Bajan heritage, but the Rihanna song, I know it was nominated
Oh
for
yeah, I
an
don't like
Oscar,
I don't like it.
but I really am not a fan of that song. Like
No.
I had forgotten that that was part of it. The minute it kicked in, I was like, "All right, this was the
Mm.
song." And um, I don't know, it was just one that I was kind of surprised that it got an Oscar nom. But I think this is what the first Marvel film to receive an Academy Award,
No, they received an
costume
Academy
design.
Award for costume
Yeah,
design
they got it for
for
the
the last
first
one.
movie.
Oh, okay. So it was so she won it twice then for the Black Panther films?
Yeah.
I hope so.
I think it was nominated for Best Picture. It might have been the first Marvel film to be nominated for that.
Right, okay.
I think it was the first. Wasn't it the first comic book movie to be nominated for best film?
Probably because they changed the
Um,
rules after Dark Knight got snubbed.
Yeah.
right. So yeah,
So like
I
yeah,
don't
that
know
would
what
Logan
else it
got
would have
confirm.
best
been.
writing, but this got best film, and as in didn't win but nominated.
That's
Yeah,
impressive.
yeah. That's yeah. This one got five nominations, and Ruth Carter won for costume design. And yeah, you're right. The
Yeah,
first one was nominated for Best Picture. Yeah, that's. I
she won
mean,
both times. Good for her.
I mean, how do you top that? Like, I've never cosplayed at Comic-Con, but if I was ever going to do it, it would totally be the Submariner. Like, that is a badass look
I
with the
mhm.
jewelry, the gold, and the
and
wings
it
on your
did look
feet.
like the comics. Like I
Yeah,
think that's what I liked about this run, like the post Endgame run, was they weren't afraid to be like, let's put them in the comic book stuff, like across the board. The quality of shows and movies varied, but being able to be like, we're just doing what is in the comics for the thing. As someone who likes costumes a lot, was a
yeah.
big deal for me, and rewatching it, I'm like, yeah, like this Namor, like Namor stuff looks great. Like I it's really cool to see it, and it didn't look silly because it's in general. You tell him like, yeah, he's some guy that just has like a bikini bottom on and then got wings on his feet. Could sound funny, but he looks great in the movie.
Yeah.
I absolutely loved his throne with like I guess it's like the shark
Hmm.
teeth all around it. Like this
And they gave
just
them their own Wakanda for everything with the like open jaw thing. I was like, yeah,
mm,
I'm into this. I like this a lot. I saw people being like, "Oh, it's so dark down there," and I like that they're like, "Yeah, that was on purpose because like of the amount of light that would actually be down there."
mhm.
As Victor said, like just the detail put into like creating this universe.
They also went out of their way to try and create a world that didn't look like Aquaman as well, right? And that
Yeah,
really like colored everything in and lit it up. It had this kind of sci-fi neon look, and they tried to make it look a little more like natural sunlight penetrating into the sea.
yeah, definitely. Um, all right, guys. I mean, I don't have anything else to say about the movie. Do you guys? Before we do our ratings out of 10, what is there anything else we want to capture before we do that?
I think we hit it all.
Yeah, I can't think of
Perfect.
anything.
Perfect. All right, guys. Um, out of 10, what would you give Black Panther: Wakanda Forever?
8.5.
All right.
Yeah, I would go seven. In the past, it was a solid eight, but
Okay.
it's gone down a slight peg.
That's all right. It did go down for me, but it went down to an 8.5. I had it at 9 when I first saw it, but it went down to an 8, and it could go up the next time I see it. But 8.5 today. I really enjoyed it, but there were some things. Um, yeah, Victor, Courtney, I really appreciated having you on here. I'm really glad we had the conversations we had. Uh, Courtney, you can go first. Is there anywhere you want people to find you online? Anything you're this is coming out next week, so if there's any time sensitive stuff, you can let people know where they can catch up with it.
On most social media apps, I'm at Small Mind or some variation of Small Mind on, I guess, Blue Sky and Twitter, what have you. In terms of things to promote, I have a couple of reviews coming out for different places, but I guess the closest would be I have a review of a film called The Line, which is going to hit VOD, I guess, just as this drops. It stars Alex Wolff, um, not Chloe Bailey, Halle Bailey is also in it, John Malkovich, and it's
Nice.
all basically about fraternities and the hazing culture.
Oh wow.
It's actually quite interesting. So I'm gonna have a review up for Exclaim about that when this comes out.
Awesome. Victor, how about you?
I'm at Victor J. Stiff on Twitter or X and Instagram. You can find me at Victor Stiff on Rotten Tomatoes. And I just wrote a pretty cool piece on the 10-year anniversary of The Babadook, one of my favorite
Mm,
horror films.
nice.
And I wrote that for CBR, so you can look for that.
All right. I'm gonna definitely read that. Um, yeah, thank you very much, guys. The podcast is at TDF Spoiled on most things. So TikTok, Threads, Instagram. We're on YouTube, youtube.com/at TDF Spoiled. And if you want to hear our episodes or get them when they first come out, then definitely subscribe on all the podcast platforms that you may use. And if you want to hear older episodes, go to tdfeverything.com/spoiledrotten. You'll find our episodes and different ways to get in touch with us. Thank you very much for listening. Goodbye.
This has been a TDF Everything production, brah.